You know, a good way to think about Canadian medicine is like everything's free, but we don't have any of it. But I realized that there really are no adults in the room. I firmly believe at this point that 99.9% of patients can resolve this. I mean, everyone's retarded. We're all retarded in some way or another, which is why it's important that we doctor know there's no way you have sleep apnea. You're too skinny, you're too young, you're too healthy. There's just no way you have sleep apnea. Everyone really thinks that Big Daddy government is gonna fix all their problems. But in fact, Big Daddy government creates most of the problems and doesn't fix very many of them, right? You guys should pat yourself on the back too that you're even still here. After all those dismissals, after all of your suffering, after all of your investigation, you're still standing, say, you know what? Fuck all you guys. You're wrong. I know you're wrong still. That's life in the NFL, okay? If they don't like it, they can go stock shelves at night where there is no pressure. Well, hold on a second. A lot of this stuff just isn't true. So why did they tell me this, right? And you should not take that for granted. Don't squander that, you know, and you should be happy for that. All right, everyone, gather around, my brothers and sisters. It's story time. You know, I've been wanting to share this story for a while because I think it'll help some people. Because I think a lot of people, or at least through my personal encounters with many patients, helping them with their CPAP and helping them with their sleep, I keep hearing the same story. Now, what is that story? And why am I doing this video? I'm doing this video primarily because I hope that it can prevent many patients from taking the same path that I took, which was an unnecessary path, a path with far more pain than it needed to have. And it's just a tragedy to keep watching that go on, even though I've gone through it. And now I can tell people, hey, this ain't the road. And I'm gonna start from zero, so wah, if you've already seen my other video that covers some of this, but basically years ago, when I was about 23, I'm 31 now, I started waking up and not being able to fall back asleep. And I thought, you know, probably like a lot of people, oh, it's just the stress of my life and it's just a stressful time and, you know, maybe there's some truth in that. It got to a point where it made my life dysfunctional and I had to do something about it. So I go to the doctor and I complain. You gotta remember, I'm a baby at this point. I don't know anything. I don't even know what sleep apnea is. I go in and of course they say, oh yeah, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, here's some sleeping pills and try to de-stress and figure out a way to, you know, get through the bad sleep. Time goes on, sleeping pills don't work, get different sleeping pills, those don't work. I get online, start punching my symptoms in, seeing what sleep disorders are there, which ones are common, what are the symptoms, what does it look like, what kind of characteristics would we expect? Oh, well, it kind of sounds like I might have sleep apnea. Go back to the doctor, hey doctor, you know, I really think I have this thing called sleep apnea. Doctor, no, there's no way you have sleep apnea. You're too skinny, you're too young, you're too healthy. There's just no way you have sleep apnea. Try these breathing exercises though, and you know, take some more sleeping pills. Or it's in your head, or you know, stuff like that. Time goes on. Do a little more research, get a little more data, go back. Hey, I still can't sleep. I've been having this sleeping problem. I've tried these pills. None of that's working. I'm pretty sure I have this thing called sleep apnea. No, you don't have sleep apnea. There's no way. You're too young. Trust me. I know what people with sleep apnea look like. Okay. Eventually, after literally, if I won $1 million for getting the number of times correct that I went back and that happened, I would say it was 5 or 6 times. Anyways, get to my family doctor and he gives me a sleep study, which I do at home, and lo and behold, I have sleep apnea, but it comes back mild. Start the CPAP, doesn't work. Feels like shit. Continue to have sleep problems, you know, back and forth. Okay, I'll try the CPAP because my quality of life is so abysmal that let's give it another try. Doesn't work. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So let me fast forward a little bit. The complaints continue. My family doctor was professional enough and cognizant enough to refer me to a sleep physician, so someone who actually specializes in sleep medicine, who is a respirologist. It's the way it works in Canada. And this doctor was also very, very helpful, but I also believe that He's completely overwhelmed with the number of patients he has. I think that he doesn't have time to keep up with respect to where sleep medicine is because he's very busy being a respirologist. He probably gets called into the hospital all the time, and sleep medicine is this thing he does, but there's other things he also does. And it's my personal opinion at this point in my road of learning and understanding that it's very difficult to do more than just sleep medicine if you wish to be an effective sleep medicine doctor, because there's just too much to cover. And that's why I tell patients typically, I would not recommend going to a surgeon or a sleep specialist for a comprehensive evaluation of what's wrong with you who doesn't actually hyper specialize in sleep medicine, because what seems to be the pattern manifesting itself is that the people at the very forefront say one thing and the people who are not there say another. And then it becomes the simple question of, well, who's right? Well, I know where I'll be placing my chips, right? Let's get back to the story. I get to my sleep physician. Well, he's a respirologist. He's not a surgeon, right? He's not an airway specialist. He's someone who specializes in lungs and in breathing. And so perhaps his area is more CPAP, we can say. So I get referred to an ENT. Of all the criticism that this guy deserves, and again, in the end, I have good things to say about him. But something that's severely broken in this system is being sent to an ENT who, again, doesn't hyper-specialize in sleep apnea. What happened at the ENT, the first ENT, which is an ear, nose, and throat doctor, otolaryngologist? Those are synonymous. What happens? They stick a scope down your airway, and they evaluate to see if there's anything that they can do. So he sticks the scope down my throat and concludes that there's nothing that can be done for me. Well, that was very different than what I heard eventually down the road from independent consultations and airway analyses that I received from the Centers of Excellence in Sleep Medicine, many of which are in the United States of America. Now, at that point in the journey, I was referred to a second ENT, but the second ENT appointment was basically a mirror of the first one. And again, basically said within the consultation notes, mild sleep apnea, there's nothing I can do for him. And you keep in mind, in Canada, for these waits, I was waiting, I'm pretty sure, around 8-9 months to see these ENTs, to walk in for about 5 minutes and be dismissed with a very similar consultation readout to the preceding one. So at this point in time, nothing's been fixed. Years have gone by. I've seen 2 ENTs, I've seen a sleep physician, respirologist, and of course I've had my sleep test and all this. Okay, after 2 ENTs and seeing one of them actually twice, at this point in time I've learned a little bit. I've been reading the literature, I've been trying to figure out what's wrong with me. So I set up an appointment with the Breathe Institute in California, which in my opinion is a great comprehensive place to get a proper analysis or evaluation of your airway and how bad your sleep is, because these guys specialize in it. It's what they do, right? And they basically say, yeah, you have these anatomical deficiencies, you have upper airway resistance syndrome, it's different, blah, blah, blah. We recommend you get this surgery and this surgery. And then, so I go back I'm in Canada, and I have this new information, and I get referenced to another ENT who is supposed to be a little bit more specialized and better than the ones before with respect to sleep medicine. I'm feeling hopeful, of course, right? This is a surgeon. I get to his office, he scopes me, he gives me a list of recommendations, the first of which is to use a device which is no longer on the market, and the second is basically to get surgery. So once I find out the device isn't on the market and I can't get a hold of it, it's not even sold in Canada, I, of course, resort to the next recommendation, which is surgery. And that's kind of where everything spins out and the big, long, multi-year headache begins. So basically in Canada, there's a policy of free healthcare. Now, that's not entirely true. There's a lot of shit that ain't free. For example, the CPAP machine's not free, dentistry's not free, psychiatry's not free, counseling's not free. Physiotherapy's not free, medication's typically not free, elective surgeries are not free. Anyways, but there is a policy in place that says if you need a surgery which is appropriate, medically appropriate and necessary, and we can't do it in Canada, then we'll fund it for you to do it elsewhere. So you can see where this is going. The ENT, which I saw in Vancouver, said that he doesn't do the maxillary expansion, and that he'll sign off on an application that says I need this, and that we don't have it. So the gist of it basically is that all the doctors, all the medical professionals in my region signed off on this documentation and signed off on this specific surgery, saying it's not available here and Andrew needs this. Yeah, my name's Andrew, by the way. And I'm thinking, hell yeah, here we go. Finally, I'm gonna get the solution that I embarked on to find 5 years ago, right? Oh no. You haven't met a Canadian bureaucrat if you think that's the case. They basically slow walked me, fabricated things, reference you to 18th century, jurist type language in documents that are ambiguous. Oh man, it is a special kind of practice. It's kind of like an art, because it's definitely not a science. We know that. You can ask these people in simple, clear, easy to understand language questions, which for some reason kind of just blow past. You'll get a response and you'll wonder, well, what happened to my question? Well, let me go check my send email. Oh, I did ask the question. Well, how come they didn't answer the question? Well, sometimes you gotta understand, sometimes they just kind of don't feel like it. Maybe just ask the question at another time, they're just not really feeling like answering that question right now. Like, back off, You're starting to make them feel uncomfortable. In hindsight, and, as I've gotten older, looking back, it's obviously clear now that I shouldn't have expected to smoothly arrive at my destination. Expecting that is expecting people to basically not be retarded, which is a pretty tall order, right? I mean, everyone's retarded. We're all retarded in some way or another, which is why it's important that we agree on some set of rules which are predictable when we communicate and work with each other, like logic. But the problem is that you can't logic with government bureaucrats, it seems, and so you're kind of at a non-starter. So, if I were to bestow any words of wisdom, don't have a lot of faith in the government being the path to that solution. As I've mentioned in an earlier video, I wish I went to the right people right away. Going through this whole process, it was one of the most valuable things that actually ever happened to me, because I realized, and at perhaps a relatively young age, maybe not, maybe I'm late to the game, I don't know, but I realized that there really are no adults in the room. You look up and you start to ask, who's the person? Coming into contact with the medical system and at all these different contact points, I came to realize that there really is no one in charge. There is no adult in the room. There's basically, bureaucratic entanglements up here, basically parameterizing the space in which these people can practice medicine, and then it's just a shit show. And, this isn't to say that the Canadian medical system doesn't have any admirable qualities. That's not the case. The Canadian medical system is great in a lot of ways. Like, for example, if you need emergency medicine, or just a true, like trauma. You have an emergency, you need something done right now, it's a great place to be. However, if you're not there, you're kind of just pushed to the wayside, and you're just gonna, progress from stage 1, 2, 3, 4 until you need intensive treatment and you've lost half your life. Then they'll help you. But until then, for some reason, there's just not a lot of resources to go around. A good way to think about Canadian medicine is like, everything's free, but we don't have any of it. I shouldn't have been referred to people who weren't really specialized in sleep medicine. Big waste of everyone's time. Big waste of my time, big waste of their time, big waste of resources. What do you want me to say? That's Mexico. If you're gonna take a patient on, finish dealing with the patient. I realize that there are difficult patients. Not every patient is gonna find a solution. But just because it gets hard doesn't warrant that you get to dismiss them. And if anything, it's just a bad look for you. Let me tell you a little story within a story. That 30 ENT that I saw in Vancouver that was supposed to be a little bit better of an ENT. My first appointment with them, I spent maybe 7 minutes. My second appointment with them, I spent about a minute. And then he had to sign the document. So let's give him, in his defense, let's give him a conservative estimation that let's say 15 minutes of his time was used to provide me with care. I kid you not. I asked to speak with him again. He left me a voicemail saying he doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with the demands of my case. It's not just unprofessional, it's severely problematic. If you have a medical system of doctors just like that, ask yourself what that looks like. Which is why I admire my sleep medicine respirologist and, of course, every family doctor that exists, because he didn't give up. And perhaps if he gave up, I would have never found the solutions that I found. Who would have been there? That's a big, big, big issue in the Canadian medical system. The amount of time that's spent with a patient is minimal. Something that I hope you guys are mindful of is that, the country which you're in, or the little region of that country which you're in, it isn't the whole world, right? It's a very small sample in a very small corner of a very big globe. And just because it feels like there's no solution in sight in your little box doesn't mean that there's not a solution somewhere. There are some very remarkable, highly competent people who have devoted 40 years of their life to figuring out sleep medicine. If there's anyone who's watching this video who thinks that there are sleep doctors in Canada who are comprehensive, who really, really, really understand the nuances and subtleties of this disorder, then I ask that you share that information with me. You can find my email on my YouTube page, or you can drop a comment in the comment section. But I'd be interested in hearing. Let it be said too, look, I don't sit here and brew in anger and frustration about what happened to me. I feel for a lot of these doctors. I do, because I know it's not even close to entirely their fault. They're part of a much larger system which has a force and power of its own and doesn't allow them to have very many degrees of freedom. And it's also the case that they're basically all drowning in patients and have multi-year wait lists just to have 3-minute consultations. The world's a complex place. I'm not saying I have all the answers, and that if only it were I who was in the seat of government in the Canadian medical system, then everything would just fall into its place and we never have another issue. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that for anyone who I truly care about, I would not want to have them be stuck in the Canadian medical system in the same way that I was, because it's not a hopeful place to be. And it's not where a lot of stuff gets done. Canada used to be a great country, but I think by every metric over the last 20, 30 years, it's gone downhill. I don't know, maybe some things have gotten better. It doesn't seem that way, though. It seems like a very, very profoundly sick country. And it's kind of sad to watch. But I mean, such is life, Things go up, things go down. Empires rise, empires fall. The good and evil of humanity moves itself around through time and through space. So this is just where we are. Nietzsche says that which is falling should be pushed. Maybe that's the case. Is Canada even salvageable? I don't know. And I don't want this to come across in the wrong way. I'm not jaded. I'm not angry. I was once upon a time, because it bothered me. You expected more of these people. It's almost like a good way to understand it is like you were told you had to break out of the lies. Society does a really good job of teaching you what it wants you to know, right? And then you kind of grow up and mature and start to think for yourself and start to realize, well, hold on a second. A lot of this stuff just isn't true. So why did they tell me this, right? I have a blessed life. I feel beyond elated that I was fortunate enough to find solutions to my sleep, because I know there's a lot of people out there who are suffering and who have been working for a very long time to get to the same end, which is just reasonable quality sleep. And they can't for a variety of reasons, because they're not getting the right information, they're not getting into contact with the right healthcare professionals, they're not getting the right treatments, or, they're in some shithole country that doesn't offer anything and they don't have any money. And it's sad. It's a tragedy. And I really feel for these people. I was fortunate enough to be in a country that at least has a healthcare system. I at least got to start talking to people, and I had the resources available to me to rest upon to investigate this path on my own. and then even get to go to the best surgeons in the entire world, which is something that I always try to communicate to patients who are, yes, they're suffering, but they have this opportunity to find the answers and to talk to the best people in the world. I mean, that's a huge privilege in itself, and you should be happy for that. And you should not take that for granted. Don't squander that. Because the reality is that there's probably 1 billion people in the world who would replace themselves with your position, who have the exact same thing you do, but they're in some war-torn shithole country where they're, the difference in purchasing power between their domestic currency and the one that they need to see the doctors in the country they need to see a doctor in, it's unattainable. One philosophy that I really tried to drill into you guys, which you can perhaps find comfort or anxiety in, but try to think of yourself, you're on your own. Try to view your life as you being on your own. That is something that's wrong with Canada. Everyone really thinks that Big Daddy government is going to fix all their problems. But in fact, Big Daddy government creates most of the problems and doesn't fix very many of them, right? The people who shape their lives and shape the world, it's all action. Sitting around talking and casting votes isn't going to change Canada. And I'm not even saying do that, but I'm just saying, for example, with respect to your life, sitting around and being frustrated and writing to government bureaucrats how you need this or you need that probably isn't going to amount to much. How much more of your life do you want to spiral down the drain because you're waiting for some government bureaucrat to come to the light, which they may never will? And you have this mentality in Canada because since birth, you're indoctrinated with this idea, which is partially true and partially not, that the Canadian medical system is free and it's great and it's going to fix you. That's not always the case. It's better to be your own advocate. It's better for you to take the steering wheel, and it's better to learn, what's going on with yourself, and to get a decentralized opinion from independent practitioners, hopefully that aren't, all in the same in-group to hedge your risk and hedge your bets. You guys should pat yourself on the back too that you're even still here. After all those dismissals, after all of your suffering, after all of your investigation, you're still standing, say, you know what? Fuck all you guys. You're wrong. I know you're wrong still. You stood up for yourself. You didn't cave in to the pressure. Be proud of yourself and keep going. Just because there is a majority opinion does not make it right. Follow the data, follow the evidence, be logical, keep an open mind, and don't let your opinion be swayed by emotion. Ask the hard questions. These people are responsible for answering the hard questions. They can deal with some pressure and some criticism. We can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. And if that's too much for them, well, that's life in the NFL. Go stock shelves at the grocery store in the middle of the night if you don't want the pressure. Something you gotta understand though is, I'm not in the business of let's make sure that no one gets their feelings hurt. I'm in the business of let's make sure that patients get answers to their questions and get better. That's what I want to see. Zoom out. You're in some little small place in the world where yes, there's some local providers and maybe you hit the lottery and those local providers are the best sleep physicians in the world. Great. But maybe not, right? This landscape is always changing. Just because it may feel like despair today doesn't mean that it can't feel like hopefulness tomorrow. This field is moving at the speed of light. And I firmly believe at this point that 99.9% of patients can resolve this. It's just they need to get into the proper hands. They need to be taking some specific, individualized combination of treatments which are tailored to them. But they don't, right? We just hear the same thing over and over. Here's the one size fits all, take a CPAP. Here's the one size fits all, take a UPPP. That doesn't work though. In the end, we're all gonna make it, okay? If you're having a shit day and you think your life's over and you're feeling like killing yourself, don't do it, okay? Many of us have been there. I've spoken to countless patients that wanted to kill themselves. You get one good sleep and everything's back. It's fucking woo, let's go. So I thought my life was over 50 times, I promise you. It's it. I didn't think I was gonna even live to 30 because I was done. It sucks. I know, trust me, I know. But the body is a brilliantly resistant thing and you can come back and be 10 times better than you ever were, okay? Shitty sleep, yes, it ruins everything. There's nothing worse. It's the first thing you'll die from. It's not water, it's not food, it's sleep, right? And nothing in the world is enjoyable. Nothing feels like even doing. Nothing even feels like it's worth doing. Whether it's having fun, building something, reading something, if you have a shitty sleep. I get it. I know. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not sleeping right. And we need to make you sleep right. It's simple, but it's a complex path sometimes. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I'll do more technical, obviously, CPAP stuff. And also, I just wanted to mention too, one thing I really want to leave with you guys is that most people have no idea what they're talking about, okay? Most people. That includes the doctors, that includes your family and friends who doubt you. They just don't know, I was doubted by everyone. I was doubted by the doctors, doubted by my friends, family, everyone on the planet, right? Someone's got to do it, right? And, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, who will go for us? Who will we send? And I said, here am I. Send me, I'll do it. Here am I. Ask yourself if they're being logical, if they actually have good reasons. A lot of people will watch like an Andrew Huberman podcast and then think that they're sleep experts. That's just the world we live in. Look what happened with the pandemic, right? Everyone was suddenly a vaccinologist or biochemist. I studied biochemistry, and no one wanted my opinion. Everyone else was a scientist automatically overnight. So that's just the world we're in. You got to deal with it. You just have to, these people walk among us. You're probably one of them to some extent, and that's just the way things are. But factor it in, and let's go. As you guys know, I now do one-on-one consultations. We can look at your CPAP data, or we can talk about anything you want. I'm always going to append to that there's tons of free shit on the internet, and you can basically get everything that I could give to you for free going to the places which I mention all the time. Just go watch my videos. There's apnea board, there's endless videos on YouTube, there's endless resources, there's AI, there's everything. So you don't need to pay anything, but I also constantly get asked, and so I made this available, but I can't sit around and do shit for free all the time because I have to pay bills, and there's, the world's not free. So, so far it's been really good feedback, and I might focus a bit more on it, but yeah, we'll see. I just want you guys to be better, because how could you possibly know, what effect you could have on a person in the final equation of humanity? Think about it. Obviously this is a global shit show. This isn't just Canada. Obviously you guys are wherever country, and you're probably dealing with something very similar. So I realized in editing that I forgot basically the most important part of this whole story, which is that I collated about 105 pages of documents with about 23 pages of scientific written argument with 75 citations of scientific literature to explain to anyone who is on the end of evaluating this case precisely why this was the surgery which was needed and why it's not available in Canada. That is, I was explaining to them how maxillary expansion is not maxillary expansion is not maxillary expansion. And you may still be asking, what happened? How could they say no, and why did they say no? Basically, they just play semantic word games in the end. They ride the ambiguity of words like appropriate and medically necessary, and whether an appropriate surgery is available in Canada. Well, what does it mean, appropriate? And so they just use the interpretation which is self-serving. It's the same reason that you can't beat the tax man, right? Because there is no objectivity to it. The law doesn't exist so that which ought to be will be. The law exists to prove that which is what ought to be. You get it? And they showed their cards. I had to know, though. I also reached out to all the members of the Medical Services Commission, which is basically the arm of government which is responsible for overseeing these policies in which I find myself, and I'm trying to have finance this surgery. But, as the saying goes, he who blames others has a long way to go. He who blames himself is halfway there. And he who blames no one has arrived. Maybe if I didn't go through this hellscape, you wouldn't have a CPAP friend. Alright guys, as you were, back to figuring out your sleep. Stop watching this video. See ya. We're all gonna make it.